Let's start out with hope. And when you think about hope, you think about not hope, but sometimes it takes you to hopelessness. In 1968, when Martin Luther King died, I was a senior in college. And I remember very clearly the day he died. And I remember I was sitting there, and when we got the word that Martin Luther King had been killed, it was like everybody in America, every black person in America that had hope, lost their hope that day. If they can kill Martin Luther King, what can they do to the rest of us? So that right there was something we had to come back from. We really had to come back from that. I remember the rioting in 66, 67, and 68. I remember Detroit, Michigan being burned down. I remember Chicago being burned down. I remember Washington, D.C. being burned down. I remember riots in Los Angeles. They were going on all over the country. And what I remember was that as these things were going on, it was out of frustration. It was out of hope. It was like, what can we do to make people understand that we are people too and we need to be considered as people? So the rioting we saw it, was frustration. Even though we didn't like it and we didn't appreciate it, it was a frustration of there is no hope. So what we had to do was to find hope. What I remember then, we started talking about leadership. We talked about black leaders. Other black leaders rose up. At the same time, we had two presidents, President Johnson and President Nixon. These two presidents, one came up with the Voting Rights Act of 1964 and the Civil Rights Act of 1965. The second one came up with something called affirmative action. And so sometimes when we start talking about change and we start talking about we need to fix some things, we need to put things in place that will force change. What those acts did, they legitimized our rights as human beings. 50s and the 60s and even into the 70s, I participated in lots of movements that changed what was going on in our country. Going back into the 50s, in 1958, Clara Luper used her youth group to open up Oklahoma City for allowing African Americans to go in restaurants and eat. I talk about that because I was 11 years old when I participated in that. To be very frank and very honest, at 11 years old, you don't really understand how the depth of what you're doing. You just kind of do it because it's kind of cool to do. Even though it was cool to do, we were spit on, we were cursed at, we were called the N-word, but at the same time, we knew that we needed to do that. The thing I liked about the sit-in movement was that Miss Luper trained us. She taught us. She worked with us. She rehearsed us so that when we went in and we had to deal with all this hostility, we were prepared for it. And I think sometimes when we do these protests now, we don't realize what we're getting into until we get into it. We want to create a situation, but at the same time, we're not looking at the result that we want to create. It's okay to be in a chaotic situation, but we should be looking at some kind of result coming out of it that's going to say, this is the way we want to affect change. When we went into the sit-in movement, we specifically were looking for a specific change that did that. The protest marches, the March on Selma, the different things that were going on throughout the South then, it changed the housing laws in this country. It changed the desegregation of the schools. We often talk about Brown versus Topeka in the sense that that opened up schools. Yeah, the law changed, but it took 10 to 15 years before things really changed. It took lawyers like John Green and others in other places. It took Thurgood Marshall going around even after that to make sure that these different communities, these different states opened up. Oklahoma did not open up its school system until until about 1970 to 71 and 72. That's 15, 16, 17 years after Brown versus Topeka. But here again, lawyers took the lead in making sure that that happened and making sure that the laws were changed either through law in legislature or law by court edict was done in such a way to make that happen. I am so proud to be a child, first of Ada Law Scipio Fisher, but also to be a child of John Green, who really, really changed the landscape of how we see and actually how we live in Oklahoma. Okay, I started this conversation with the word hope. I want to end this conversation with the word hope. And I'm saying this to our students that are right here, right now. Our African American students, our Native American students, our Hispanic students, our Asian students, and our white students. Hope. One of the things that we often want as a young person, we want everything to be right now. And so when I go back to the fact that it took 15 years after Brown versus Topeka, all the way through Dow versus Oklahoma City, to get Oklahoma to be where it needs to be. I don't think it needs to take 15 years, but I do think it needs to take leadership, and leadership for me comes from young lawyers. So the message that I have for young lawyers at the University of Oklahoma College of Law is, one, do your homework, become the best lawyer you can be, and then take advantage of opportunities when it comes your way to move things forward. Sometimes it's about doing what you can do in law school, but remember, it's really about when you become a lawyer, after you get out of this place, being what you can be. I'm fiercely proud of the graduates that I've seen come through the University of Oklahoma College of Law. It's scary to me. I've sit here and I watched, I think right now, I have something like about 15 or 1,600 children that have come out of this law school. And as I'm watching them grow and watching them see, I'm just proud of what the University of Oklahoma College of Law is producing. And as I look at our alums now, our young alums and our alums to be, how the world is going to change. I have a tremendous amount of hope now, because I know if you've been down, it's you that are coming through law school that are going to be lawyers that's going to turn this hope into reality.